President Trump is deploying the National Guard to Washington, D.C. While he says his administration aims to crack down on crime and homelessness, some are asking if this move is part of a Project 2025. At almost 1,000 pages long, it is an ambitious and controversial right-wing blueprint for transforming executive power. And just over 200 days into Trump's second term, one online tracker says the agenda is nearly halfway through completion.
Project 2025 would roll back our fundamental freedoms, undermine our democracy, and gut checks and balances.
This 920-page document would usher in the most conservative executive branch in modern American history, if enacted. It's called Project 2025. Its pages offer new administrations a blueprint for executing a right-wing agenda, from purging the government of thousands of civil servants to dismantling the Department of Education.
We do have to initiate the largest mass deportation project in the history of this country.
In Project 2025 and other documents, there's like, no, we can operationalize the border. We're going to do remain in Mexico, all these other details.
What is Project 2025? It is everyone here. This is the movement. We are going to be prepared day one, January 2025, to hit the ground running as conservatives to really help the next president. Heritage got on the marker as an organization by delivering the first mandate for leadership in 1980 to President-elect Reagan. We also, over time, gave a lot of resumes in, but when Dr. Roberts came aboard, he said, this task in 2024 is too big for any one think tank. This has to be a movement. And what we've done is use our convening power here at Heritage to bring the entire movement together. So 2025 is not a Heritage thing, it's a conservative movement thing.
Kevin Roberts is the CEO of the conservative political think tank, the Heritage Foundation, and the man behind the initiative published in the year 2023, Project 2025. But who is guiding him in his conservative political endeavors? It is the radical Catholic group Opus Dei, as documented in London's Guardian newspaper. So as the narrator always tells people, we know where all roads will eventually lead to. For not only is President Donald Trump fulfilling its mandate that he has cleverly tried to deny, but it was also endorsed by the late conservative activist Charlie Kirk, that he claimed at the Oxford Union he supposedly had little knowledge of. Who exactly is this young man, the late Charlie Kirk, who is receiving empathy from the US government, the US media, and the US churches? Well, if you want to understand how any political machine works, as the narrator always instructs people, always follow the money, for there you will get the answers. The Associated Press described him as a 29-year-old activist who became a millionaire in the year 2023. And as his organization Turning Point USA grew, so did his salary and his wealth. When he died at 31 in the year 2025, Fortune magazine described him as a college dropout who was the CEO of a $92 million a year movement with a direct line to President Trump by 31. So how did this young man create a MAGA $100 million machine who did not work a regular job? Well, The Guardian documented in the year 2024 that he was among the many far-right groups that received powerful conservative funds. But it was Fox News that gave more detail of the business-related organizations who financially supported Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA. The Marcus Foundation, founded by the late billionaire Bernie Marcus, donated $2.5 million in 2023. The Ed Uihlein Family Foundation, operated by billionaire Richard and Elizabeth Uihlein, contributed $50,000. The Deason Foundation, founded by billionaire Darwin Deason, contributed $250,000. The Dunn Foundation, founded by the entrepreneur William Dunn, contributed $1 million. And the Bradley Foundation, via the Bradley Impact Fund, donated over $8.1 million to Turning Point USA in 2023. Now, the late billionaire Bernard Marcus, who died in November 2024, standing on the left with his wife, financially supported Charlie Kirk. The billionaire couple, the Yulins, according to Forbes, are pumping their fortune into right-wing politics, where Richard Yulin became one of GOP's mega donors. The Dunn Foundation, founded by the late William Dunn, who died in April 2025, standing on the front right, funded Charlie Kirk. Now, the Bradley Impact Fund, which wants to promote American ideals, was also a very big donor to Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA. And Doug Deason, president of Deason Capital Services Inc., who, and highlighted in blue, manages a diversified portfolio of public and private assets. That includes a large portfolio of public equity and debt securities, hedge funds, private equity that includes direct and fund-based holdings, private debt, oil and gas, real estate and other assets. Now in this photo, Doug Deason is on the right, his billionaire father Darwin Deason is on the left, and in the red dress is Ivanka Trump, the daughter of President Donald Trump. So even though Charlie Kirk was funded by some of the men who financially steer the US political machine, some say that he was just humbly promoting Christianity.
So when I heard the tragic news, I said, oh, I wonder who he was. And then all of a sudden, this overwhelming sense of sorrow and kind of renewal. And I thought, I got to learn about this guy. And the more I learned about him, I thought, this guy's a modern day St. Paul. He was a missionary. He's an evangelist. He's a hero. He's one, I think, that knew what Jesus meant when he said, the truth will set you free.
Who was Charlie? Fundamentally, he was a Christian man, and Jesus was the center of his life. That was obvious to anyone who knew him. It emerged in conversation immediately when you talked to him. That's just a fact about Charlie. His life was about following Jesus, period.
Now when Charlie Kirk died, the narrator was so surprised and shocked to see both the church and the state come together in one voice of solidarity. It felt like the trial run for the mark of the beast. But was he a follower of Jesus Christ, or like traditional historical Western imperialistic Christianity, who used religion for his own political ethnocentric ends and objectives? Well, throughout this study we will listen to his own words and compare them with state documents and the Holy Scriptures.
Big defender of individual freedom and liberty, and I get a lot of hate from my social conservative friends when I argue for decriminalization of drugs. I've never done drugs in my life, and I don't plan to, but if someone wants to do it, cool, right? Whatever. You know, put whatever you want to put in your body as long as it doesn't harm someone else. So how can you possibly be on the side of decriminalization of marijuana? I said, listen, I went to high school in the north suburbs of Chicago, okay? I remember after football games, like kids had backpacks full of marijuana. Mm-hmm. Now, marijuana is illegal in Illinois. Marijuana is illegal in Cook County, and there were cops in our halls looking for it all the time. It was not working, okay? It's like, let's just put it that way. The kids who wanted it found it. The kids like me who didn't want anything to do with it just walked away. What other better illustration of freedom than that? You don't want to engage with it, just walk away. Yeah. Find somewhere else to do it.
What would be the exact issue with full legalization of marijuana?
How much time you got? So, yeah, everything from it's a false promise of liberty. So I used to be kind of for this because I was in high school and I used to say, oh yeah, people used to do weed, like whatever. First of all, it makes the places that you live unenjoyable for almost all people.
Segue to one final point is what I think is the position that needs to be articulated better is I have no problem with, gay marriage, whatever. Like I believe marriage, one man, one woman. That's my own personal position, right? But I'm never going to tell government to have someone live a life. I think it's cool you're married. I think it's great. And you should have all the same tax benefits, adopt children. It's great.
Maybe you can educate me. Can you point to me a great power that endorsed same-sex marriage? Not cohabitation, but marriage.
Ancient Mesopotamia.
As marriage. As recognized.
As marriage that exists.
Recognized by the state.
100%.
And how did that work out for them?
It worked out perfectly fine. It was an accepted norm of society.
Okay, I still think it's wrong.
Now, imagine today how much trouble you would get in if you would go up to somebody and say, stop sinning. You're being too judgmental. No, you're actually being Christ-like. So Jesus stood. He was 100% grace and truth. And that tension is very hard in a modern world because we want to overemphasize grace when in reality Christ loves us too much to have us continue to live in sin. He wants us to try to elevate our actions to glorify God in all that we do.
Prime Minister, you have your own memories of Charlie Kirk. Please share them.
Well, Harris, before I do that, I have to say that we're just heartbroken. Myself, my wife, my family, my son, actually, on his 2019 visit to Israel, had lunch with him and his wife, Erica. We're shattered first as human beings because a great human being has been taken from us. Was an extraordinary friend. He said, he wrote me a letter on May 2nd this year. He said, one of my greatest joys as a Christian is advocating for Israel and forming alliances to defend Judeo-Christian civilization.
That Israel was involved in a little bit of a deception campaign. Totally legitimate. There's nothing wrong with deceiving your enemy. Israel was apparently able to execute some stunning infiltrations, such as smuggling explosives directly into Iran in advance of the strike. Regardless of your opinion of Israel, even if you hate Israel to your core, you have to have remarkable respect for Mossad and their military for what they were able to pull off here. And in some ways, for many people in this audience, and also for those of us that want to see civilization succeed, this is very satisfying to watch.
So for Western civilization to continue, let's not share the everlasting gospel to save souls, but let us bomb people around the world into submission. Now, when a man is posthumously being praised by another man who has waged merciless wars with his neighbors in the Middle East, with US financial support, and the same man, when alive, was fully supported by a number of Christian ministries in the United States of America, then something is not quite adding up. In one breath you're talking about Jesus Christ, and in another breath you are glorifying the historical war theatre of US foreign policy in Western Asia. Now, his staunch defenders say we must separate his faith from his politics. Now, how does that work? In James chapter 3 and verse 10, it says, out of the same mouth proceedeth both blessing, I love Jesus, and cursing, let's go to war. These things ought not so to be. You cannot be double-tongued. In Matthew chapter 22 verses 20 and 21, Jesus is unequivocally clear when they try to trap him, that we give unto God his due, and we give unto Caesar his due, but do not merge politics and religion together. Jesus also tells us that we will be held accountable by the words that we say. In Matthew chapter 12 and verse 37, Jesus says, for by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned. These are the words of the Lord. Never also forget that Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 21 also says that death and life is in the power of the tongue. So how do words affect people in politics and in life? Rand published a study on a political strategy called stochastic terrorism, from words to action. So how does stochastic terrorism work? Well, a broadcaster makes one or more demonizing, dehumanizing, or denigrating statements or utterances about an individual or a group using language, symbolism, and or visual material. These statements or utterances take place in a climate of hostility and exclusion, but do not explicitly call for hatred or violence. Very cleverly done. The broadcaster in question may even explicitly distance themselves from the use of violence and refer to, it's just humor, or claim that, well, it was only meant metaphorically. The relevant messages or utterances are shared and disseminated through either social media and or news media. This does what? Creates interaction between media consumers. In the ensuing discourse, an interpretation is given to the relevant utterances of the broadcaster, whereby the meaning is amplified and or modified in such a way that in individual cases it does constitute explicit excitement or calls for hatred or violence. This is exactly what Charlie Kirk did. And 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 3 tells us that we should be giving no offense in anything, that our ministry be not blamed. The secular world, but sadly not most of the church, could see right through him. And when the narrator would carefully comb through several social media posts, this is how the free-thinking, secular-minded individuals described him. For they could see right through the religious fog. They described his language as hatred disguised as righteousness, Jim Crow in tight jeans, violence disguised as patriotism, elimination rhetoric disguised as political discourse, a professional divisive provocateur who built a career out of demonizing others, loud and proud bigot, turned white vengeance into a brand, power masquerading as faith. If he's going to heaven, then we are all going to heaven. Wow. Cherry-picked stats. Envision society dominated by one racial group. Use cliches to embolden those who have always had power. He wanted his ideology and beliefs to become power and law. So what was his real overall aim and agenda?
Strong men built the West and won the wars and built the building that we're in right now. And without strong men, then you all of a sudden see civilization unfold upon itself, and we're seeing that happen in real time.
There's a new book out, and I've been reading it over the weekend. Charlie Kirk, Right-Wing Revolution, How to Beat the Woke and Save the West. He's not talking about the Wild West. He's talking about the West as far as USA, Europe, this and that.
When men have carefully read through the mandate of Project 2025, a word seems to regularly pop up on its pages. It is a word called woke. And Charlie Kirk was promoting the same trajectory against it. But what exactly is woke? And when was the word popularized in modern culture? Well, you have to go back to the 1920s in North America. And though many black or African Americans had built strong communities from scratch and had done well for themselves, it was still also a time of very deep racial tensions with a number of riots. And one man wanted to boost black confidence when they felt downtrodden, and he told them to wake up. He was the Right Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, the Jamaican political activist who lived in New York for a time. Then in the 1930s, the American folk and blues singer, who went by the stage name Lead Belly, made a song in 1938 titled The Scottsboro Boys. It was the year when 9 black teenage boys were to be pardoned for being falsely accused of raping 2 white women on a train in Scottsboro, Alabama, even when the doctors examined the women and found that no rape had taken place. In an interview about the song, he told black people to stay woke and keep their eyes open or be alert of the dangers of racial injustice that faces black people. That's what the term woke means. The term was revived in the 1960s in the New York Times, where an article was written that said if you're woke, you dig it. Written by the American novelist and short story writer, the late William Melvin Kelly. So the term woke was coined by the black community in the United States of America to keep them aware on how the US westernized system works against them as blacks. It started off as a word that was popularized and trending in the black community. But then the invisible government during the COVID lockdown period hijacked it, and the word now has modern negative connotations. or it is now used against the so-called war on the left, whoever they are. So how did the late Charlie Kirk attempt to implement this war on woke when he was alive? Well, this is what his vast following will never tell you, by a man who was a so-called staunch advocate of free speech.
And Kirk's nonprofit, Turning Point USA, had a major role in conservative politics here in Arkansas as well.
The organization has its own chapter at the University of Arkansas. Laura Castleman spoke to leaders at the school about how the organization helped get more young people to be a part of the country's politics.
Turning Point USA leaders continue to publish an online database of university professors they say, quote, advanced leftist propaganda in the classroom.
He was taking over college campuses, colleges that had, in theory, only very liberal, or as they like to say, progressive. I call them liberal, but they like to call themselves, because such a beautiful word, progressive. They're the opposite of progressive, if you think about it. But they were really nasty, and he would go into these colleges. All of a sudden, within 2 years, 3 years, they turned into bastions of conservatism. It was really quite amazing to see.
What President Trump failed to mention at the funeral of Charlie Kirk was Turning Point USA Professor Watch List. This is the clever method Charlie Kirk used to infiltrate universities, not just debates. And you can see they have their strategically placed token blacks to fulfill these goals. The BBC says that the Professor Watch List is the group that wants to purge out liberal professors by the so-called champion of free speech. The Washington Post said that more than 1,500 academics asked to join the controversial Professor Watch List set up by Charlie Kirk in his woke crusade to save the West. The New York Times said that the Professor Watch List is seen as a threat to academic freedom. And The Guardian says that the Professor Watch List website elicits both fear and ridicule in US universities. This mirrors the McCarthy anti-communist witch hunts of the Cold War in the United States. And The Guardian also documents, as highlighted in yellow, that Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA's list gains fresh attention after it expands, and some notice it disproportionately names academics of color. Interesting. Now, President Donald Trump waged a war on US colleges and universities and threatened to remove their funding if they continue to teach what they label as woke or progressive ideas. And this is really annoying students, for they see that it is fueling his authoritarian appetite. But The Guardian is very clear that it was Charlie Kirk who turned the campuses into cultural battlefields. And now that he is gone and completed his work, he was the one who ushered in Trump's assault on universities. Wow. He was also known for not only accumulating a lot of financial sponsors for his work, but for spreading a lot of misinformation. But what exactly is misinformation? Misinformation is false or inaccurate information, getting the facts wrong, according to the American Psychological Association. And disinformation is false information which is deliberately intended to mislead, intentionally misstating the facts. Now, what does God say about misinformation and disinformation? Well, in Exodus chapter 20 and verse 16, the 9th of the 10 Commandments says, "Thou shalt not bear" what? "False witness against thy neighbor." First witness. In Exodus chapter 23 and verse 1, God repeats and says, "Thou shalt not raise a" what? "False report. Put not thine hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness." Second witness. And in Proverbs chapter 6 verses 16, 17, 18 and 19, it lists the 6 things that the Lord hates, and 7 are an abomination unto him. And the words underlined are a what? False witness that speaketh lies. Third witness. The Lord repeats it over again. But the last line highlighted in white says, "And he that soweth discord among brethren." Does the late Charlie Kirk qualify? Well, let's see.
Is that Charlie Kirk is calling the black community to do better. He actually wants to see the black community thrive. And he has said repeatedly how much he wants to see more black men in the home as fathers. He has said repeatedly to black people on every campus, stop having a victim mentality. Stop believing that you can't achieve the same things a white person can achieve. Stop seeing your race as something that limits you.
Can we at least agree that black dads not being around is a bad thing?
Anyone's father not being around is a bad thing.
No, of course,
not
but
specifically.
75% of black youth are not raised with a father in the home. It's the highest of any group in the country. You're
Right.
right. Black Americans are in prison far greater than their percentage of the population. So black Americans are about 13 to 14% of the population.
Yes, I
about
know
half
this.
of all prisoners are black.
Exactly.
So blacks commit more crimes than whites do. They commit more murders. They commit more arsons. They commit more kidnappings. For example, blacks are 13% of the population and they commit 58% of all the murders.
Now, when the young black female student challenged the late Charlie Kirk's position that a lack of fathers for any community is damaging, as her response did not fit his Make America Great Again narrative and agenda, he went into a Ben Shapiro moment by talking extremely fast, raising his pitch to satisfy his deeply ingrained anti-black worldview. Let's unpack what he said. The United States of America has a history of glorifying and rewarding crime, from its war films and the Godfather series, where organized crime and its trail of bodies is rewarded and praised. And Charlie Kirk, in his cherry picking of facts, totally sidestepped and overlooked the history of mass shootings in the United States of America. As the Trump administration is not too fond of data, statistics, and facts, let us look at the evidence. Sky News asks, why are white men carrying out more mass shootings who have fathers and mothers in the homes? Statista compiled data of the number of mass shootings in the United States between 1982 and August 2025. And if you look at the chart at the bottom, 84% of the shootings are committed by white males. Statista also did a study of the number of arrests for property crimes in the United States in the year 2023. 2024 is not out yet. If you look at the ethnicity and figures in blue, white males commit the highest arson. Now, Charlie Kirk said that black males commit the highest arson. That is misinformation. For it is white males who have the highest burglary, embezzlement, forgery and counterfeiting, fraud, and larceny theft. The United States Sentencing Commission data shows that white citizens in the United States also commit the highest sexual abuse offenses. This has been cleverly overlooked. Now, when the narrator was a teenager, he used to listen or was a fan of the US rap group Public Enemy, who used to preach conscious rap. And he remembers watching the music video The Night of the Living Bassheads that dealt with the damaging effects of drug use in the black community. Nick Barnes was one of the most famous known drug dealers who ran his operation in Harlem, New York. But in the United States during the 50 Years' War on drugs, it imprisoned millions of black Americans when whites were both taking and selling drugs at the same time, like Charles Lucky Luciano, the infamous mafia crime boss. So a study was compiled on the demographic differences in sentencing, and a report found that racial inequality over long US prison sentences was growing, according to the London Guardian. Courts in more Republican-leaning counties sentence black individuals to longer prison terms than white individuals, according to a study by the London School of Economics. ABC News also said that black men get longer prison sentences for the exact same crime as whites. Very, very interesting. Vox News, the third witness, also confirms the exact same conclusion. Now, don't forget that both the United States of America and the United Kingdom are both Anglo-Saxon run systems, so you'll more or less get the same results across the pond, where in the UK also, black remand prisoners are held 70% longer than their white counterparts, in both England and Wales. For Britain has a long history of profiling black boys as criminals, where they receive a lot harsher sentences. Now, back in the United States, Charlie Kirk was right when he said that 75% of black youth are not raised with their fathers, listen to this very carefully, in the home. But he cleverly missed out something which is very important that strengthened his argument. And he was sadly seconded by another token black man by the name of Larry Elder, who, while a guest on the Breakfast Club, literally parroted the exact same thing to denigrate his own race. And he used the former President Obama as his reference to give weight to this narrative. But this is where they all went wrong.
You know, for me, the discussion and polite discussion, it doesn't work. I have found that. You can go back and watch me on stage with T.I. and Killer Mike, and it doesn't work with the black community. And I have a theory on this, and I think partially it's because we have this instance of father absence.
You know, I was in Chicago a couple of 3-4 weeks ago, and we saw these little kids on bikes with masks on the side of their head, like 5 or 6 of them. And the driver said, yeah, they're little yummies. I said, who? He said, little yummies. Look up, Google Lil Yummy. Lil Yummy was an 11-year-old murderer.
Wow.
And you look at his picture, you'll see the headshot of him, and he's like this. And he got murdered at 11 by a 14-year-old.
Wow.
Who's doing life now, and a 16-year-old.
That makes no sense.
You blame the system? Where was his father? It starts in the house. It starts in the home.
Black dads are actually doing the best out of them all, according to the New York Times. Black dads, even if they are not in the homes, still are more likely to play, dress, and share a meal with their child, data shows, according to CNN. Black dads are more involved in their children's lives than any other group in the United States, according to CBS Miami. So these are the things the late Charlie Kirk deliberately overlooked because it did not fit into the MAGA narrative. And the system still sadly tries to make it harder for those men who want to invest into their children's well-being. Counteracting that negative narrative of deadbeat dads, or as they call them in the UK, a waste man. Despite the plantation narrative still embedded in the psychology of Western culture, black men are making positive inroads with the development of their children. But there are still some who want to reinforce certain dark myths. Tony Sowell in the UK cites his white British colleague Rod Liddell as a reference to prove his point that it is absent fathers that fuel killing. They totally ignore the fathers in their children's lives, and they overlooked the fact that when you have to go to family court, as one black brother told the narrator in Oxford Street in central London, they favour the mothers and they demoralise the fathers. That factor is cleverly overlooked. There are some improvements of recent. As of 2024, the British legal system is now changing that stance, so cases can be dealt with fairly for the benefit of the child. But in the UK, there are thousands of absent dads, where in some cases 1 million children are growing up without their fathers. And in some places 70% of children grow up without their fathers. So you can clearly see it has nothing to do with your ethnicity. And in the United States, marriage has declined by 60% since 1970, according to a study. And the United States, that calls itself a Christian nation, has the highest rate of children living in single-parent households. So the West, not your ethnicity, is morally declining, and people can sense it.
I think in London now, and this would be true in lots of parts of the West, about half of kids will reach the age of 15 not living with their biological father. Half. So I guess these young people just look around and they're like, well, it's like evident to me that marriage isn't working.
Now, in the memorial service of the late Charlie Kirk in Arizona, where nearly 100,000 people were in attendance, it was a religio-political spectacle and show of Pax Americana to the world, where there was obviously no mention, and the narrator shall pronounce it properly this time, of his stochastic terrorism. MAGA's outspoken golden boy was being deified and canonized in real time, in a sort of Protestant evangelical sort of way. And those who took to the stage were right-wing influencers, politicians and Christian preachers. And though his Jesuit-educated wife, the former Miss Arizona, Erica Kirk, mentioned forgiveness, these individuals used this golden opportunity, which also included the entire cabinet of President Donald Trump, to constantly promote not the gospel of Jesus Christ or love, but vengeance and retribution against the forces of darkness, whatever that might be, to promote a Republican Christian nationalism, which is a sort of merger of an ethnocentric American identity mixed with evangelical political power, using Western psychological theological language to mask its political MAGA objective. This perfectly aligned with Charlie Kirk's Anti-Woke Project 2025 mandate to show to the world that this nation, the United States of America, is on a definite mark of the beast warpath. But its right-wing language is not new. It is mainstream talking points in both religious and political conservative circles.
To dedicate ourselves to finishing his mission and achieving victory in his name. Our lineage and our legacy hails back to Athens, to Rome, to Philadelphia, to Monticello. Our ancestors built the cities. They produced the art and architecture. They built the industry. Erica stands on the shoulders of thousands of years of warriors, of women who raised up families, raised up city, raised up industry, raised up civilization, who pulled us out of the caves and the darkness into the light. The light will defeat the dark.
We're a nation of settlers, explorers, pioneers, born on the ocean waters that carried the first ships to our shores and forged in the crucible of a wild frontier. Our people tamed a continent, built a civilization from the wilderness, and wrote our nation's name into history. We Americans are the sons and daughters of the Christian pilgrims that poured out from Europe's shores to baptize a new world in their ancient faith.
We've had the incredible privilege of living in this land, and I don't care what people say or how often they say it. This country is rooted, grounded, and shaped by biblical Christianity. That's why we are who we are. That's why the West is what it is. That's what Western civilization is.
An Indian woman was seeking for some answers and doing some personal inquiries of events that were taking place in the world. And she asked the narrator a question. Why are there prominent black spokesmen for the MAGA movement? And the narrator told her that as India was once a part of the British Empire, known as the jewel in the crown, the invisible government carefully picks both men and women of Indian descent to become Western imperialist apologists who will zealously defend immigration and will also defend the system. Now in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 14 and Matthew chapter 28 verses 19 and 20, Jesus is very clear that the very role of a Christian is to preach the gospel where to the entire world and not to defend the very Western civilization that is eventually going to impose globally the mark of the beast, the image of the beast, the number of the beast, and the name of the beast, that will eventually be destroyed by the brightness of Christ's coming and by fire. But one of the main reasons they put token blacks to have influence, wealth, and can defend their arguments humbly and eloquently in the public, so that the Make America Great Again movement can say, well, how on earth can we be racist if we have black people in our team? All of their talking points is from the MAGA school of thinking. David Hackett Fisher is a US historian, and he wrote a 946-page book titled Albion's Seed: 4 British Folkways in America. And in the first chapter he said something ridiculous. Quote, "So high was mortality among, and how do you describe slaves? African immigrants in New England." Ben Carson, following that same revisionist history, also called African slaves immigrants when he was in office in the first Trump administration, and he got blasted by the black community, who have lost a great amount of respect for a man who was once the most respected neurosurgeon in the world. Now, the late Pastor Vody Bartram Jr., who passed away at the age of 56 as of this recording, and if you watch his videos in recent years, he was struggling with health issues. He was drawn into the left-right culture wars, mixing American identity with Western Christianity, and he was deeply pro-Trump, and he used all the clever buzzwords in conservative circles. You don't get into certain spaces unless you're dancing to the fiddle of the system. And when Black Lives Matter grew in popularity, who apparently reintroduced the word woke as their slogan, that conservatives responded to, Pastor Vody Bartram Jr. in the New York Post said, citing Thomas Sowell, that we have to fight against this woke movement. But the agenda is far more bigger than you are aware of.
The Honorable John G. Roberts, Jr., and the Associate Justices of the Supreme Court of the United States.
Leo is the executive vice president of the Federalist Society. That's a group of conservative lawyers who want judges to interpret the law as it was written. He advises President Trump on judicial nominations and spoke to the president yesterday following the announcement of Justice Kennedy's retirement.
Leonard Leo, he's possibly the most powerful person in America who almost no one knows about. He's played a key role in putting all 6 of the current conservative justices on the Supreme Court. Clarence Thomas, John Roberts, Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett.
I just want to make sure that our viewers understand what a significant person you are. You've been described by some as the most powerful recruiter in the world, the conservative pipeline to the Supreme Court.
Last August, conservative activist Leonard Leo received the largest political donation of all time, $1.6 billion. Before that, Leo was known for his role in reshaping the Supreme Court.
The woke collectivist ideology leads to perpetual cultural warfare and perhaps in the end actual warfare. It can only culminate in the collapse of society into darkness and barbarism.
The Catholic experience throughout history should give us hope that evangelization is eminently possible and indeed increasingly urgent. And amongst the politically active, there is a marked increase in Catholic identity. That includes a growing number of Catholic commentators in the secular media. In fact, the number of American Catholics has grown from 18 million to at least 72 million. A majority of the Supreme Court and a large number of prominent public officials are faithful Mass-attending Catholics.
Leonard Anthony Leo is an American lawyer and businessman who wears many hats. He is the chairman of Marble Freedom Trust and the Creative Response Concert Public Relations. He is on the board of the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast, the Catholic Association, the Becket Law Fund, and the Federalist Society. His very close friend and fellow Catholic comrade, Justice Clarence Thomas, has called him the third most powerful man in the world, behind the Pope and the President of the United States. Though the two most powerful men of the PayPal mafia, billionaires Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, are the most talked about people of influence, this ultra right-wing Catholic wields a lot more influence than either one of them. Like Charlie Kirk, at the Oxford Union he told students he wants to stop the spread of woke in universities, and he told the Catholic Information Center that Catholics in influential positions are making these changes. With $1.6 billion of dark money at his fingertips, given to him by a Chicago industrialist, US tycoon and right-wing megadonor Barry Side, he is using this money to attempt to reshape the entire cultural landscape of the United States of America, to transform it into a conservative utopia. But while he wants to use this money to bring back the good old days, using this money from a kind of trust fund that helped to bankroll President Donald Trump back into office for the second term, in one voice he is talking about Jesus, but in another voice, just as Jesus dealt with the money changers in the temple, people are realizing he is not about Jesus Christ at all, but for lining his pockets, where investigators are realizing this so-called moral voice is not really promoting the kingdom of heaven, but the wealth of the kingdoms of this world. By funding conservative companies, he will definitely pull the wool over many Christians' eyes in the projects that he funds.
Can one stone change the course of history?
Cowards! Send me your champion!
Goliath! Can one act of defiance create the legend?
Now, the 2025 TV series The House of David is about the life of the prophet, king, psalmist and patriarch David, the second king of Israel. It amazingly hit the #1 spot on Amazon Prime, but according to the Telegraph newspaper, it was Leonard Leo who pumped the millions into this project to bring the project alive. But what is his real overall aim, and how powerful is he? Well, he has helped to build a nationwide infrastructure of lawyers, judges and business leaders, according to the Catholic University of America website. And he is a member of the Knights of Malta, as highlighted in blue, according to the website of the United States Commission for International Religious Freedom. The independent newspaper said that he is a full supporter and backer of Project 2025, where he is waging a religious war on woke. It was shown earlier in the study that Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, works with Opus Dei. But guess what? Leonard Leo also works with Opus Dei, as documented in Rolling Stone magazine. And how far does this influence stretch? Well, with Leo and his network of dark money, Opus Dei's penetration of Washington's political and judicial worlds would now reach unprecedented levels. Now, this 439-page book, titled Opus by English financial journalist and editor Gareth Gore, that the Rolling Stones article quotes from, gives a detailed account of this network. That is, if anyone would like to do some further reading. But who exactly is Opus Dei? Well, in a book titled The Vatican Billions, published in the year 1983, the late Avro Manhattan said, quote, The Opus Dei is a semi-secret religious lay order whose paramount objective is what? Total support of the papacy and of the most conservative principles of the Catholic doctrines. Its devotion to both is unequaled. Its members have dedicated themselves with their personal and corporate wealth to be the blind instruments of the Church. Opus Dei first gained global attention and popularity with Dan Brown's 2003 novel turned into the 2006 film The Da Vinci Code, which was a very clever marketing tool for this Catholic group. Now, Opus Dei started in Spain when the Vatican backed Francisco Franco, the only fascist dictator who could strangely continue during and after the Second World War, was in power. The Spanish Catholic priest who founded it was the late Jose Maria Escriba, who, in the atmosphere of protecting Catholicism from communism, created Opus Dei, also called the Prelature of the Holy Cross. And its current head, or the prelate of Opus Dei, is Catholic priest Monsignor Fernando, and the narrator may pronounce his surname wrong, Alcaraz. But very few people are actually aware how far its influence actually stretches. Well, according to the Irish Independent, worldwide its wealth is estimated at $2.8 billion. It is known for its human trafficking and labor exploitation in South America, and its clever recruiting of innocent children. And former members have exposed it for its high levels of control and exploitation of innocent people. But it has an influence that very few are aware of. It has aligned itself with a joint network with Harvard Business School, with the Madrid Business School, ESA. How fast is this influence? Everything the narrator is going to share is documented in this 2010 Financial Times article titled Opus Dei and ESA, a matter of faith, so you can read it for yourself. ESA, the article says, is run by who? Opus Dei, and it is at the heart of one of the world's most respected business schools. Its MBA, that is Master of Administration, according to the Financial Times ranking, is among the best in the world, which also teaches law and journalism. Opus Dei has launched further technical colleges and business schools. It recently set up one in Lagos in Nigeria and a new campus in Manhattan in New York. It plans further expansion into Latin America, Eastern Europe, and the global south in Africa. Like any business school, it is supported by businesses. Its 2008 to 2009 annual report lists more than 100 companies that support it, including PwC, Barclays, Nissan, and the Rothschild. Dominic Malay is an Opus Dei priest who has been professor of business ethics at ESA for a quarter of a century. He explains that an involvement with business is central to the group's whole mission. So this is the influence of Opus Dei, where not her critics, but she openly says she wants to hold a level of influence in the business world, but also into the halls of Washington, D.C., where this little-known conservative Leonard Leo has helped shape the judicial system of the United States of America, where these hardline right-wingers have been able to give the president more power by giving him presidential immunity. And many of these judges were all once members of that conservative club titled the Federal Society, that courts and grooms law students into their image throughout their legal careers, to stay in line with an unbalanced conservative narrative where they eventually rise to the highest judicial positions, where Leonard Leo has become the gatekeeper to future judiciary leaders. But like Leonard Leo, While they pass laws and make the rules, they don't actually apply it to themselves. But just as Leonard Leo has been able to engineer these Catholic judges to influence policy and change in the United States of America, the late Charlie Kirk did the same thing at a grassroots level.
Hey everybody, JD Vance here, live from my office in the White House complex and filling in for somebody who cannot be filled in for, but I'm going to try to do my best, my dear friend, the great Charlie Kirk. The thing is, every single person in this building, we owe something to Charlie. He was a joyful warrior for our country. He loved America. He devoted himself tirelessly to making our country a better place. He was a critical part of getting Donald Trump elected as president, getting me elected as vice president. And so much of our success over the last 7 months is due to his efforts, his staffing, his support, and his friendship.
And it was Charlie who was among the first to speak to me about a man from Ohio by the name of J.D. Vance. Have you ever heard of him? He's doing a good job.
I'm John Yep, president of Catholics for Catholics. I know there are a lot of testimonies out there about the great Charlie Kirk, but I thought it important to share mine. I was blessed to have some privileged interactions with Charlie about his faith that I know now weren't just meant for me, but for the world. And so here's my final salute to my friend and brother in arms. Yes, we work together. Catholics for Catholics was the official Catholic partner with Turning Point Action during the 2024 election. We helped chase down 2.1 Catholic voters in the 7 swing states. This alone was something I'll never forget. We achieved the greatest landslide among Catholic voters in U.S. history. He asked me if I knew any Catholic priests he could talk to. A couple of weeks later, he was sitting in the office of a dear priest friend. The relationship between that priest and the Kirk family became very close. It became a source of great strength for them during these last tragic days.
And I mean, look, I love Catholics. You know, as people know, I'm very close to even my local Catholic priest, Father Klein, great guy. My wife was baptized Catholic, but I have some big disagreements with Catholicism. And the first of which would be Mariology. But let me first say, I think we as Protestant evangelicals under-venerate Mary. She was very important. She was a vessel for our Lord and Savior. I think that we as evangelicals and Protestants, we've overcorrected. We don't talk about Mary enough. We don't venerate her enough. Mary was clearly important to early Christians. There's something there. In fact, I believe one of the ways that we fix toxic feminism in America is Mary is the solution. Okay, well, the first American Pope. Keep talking, John. He seems to be, some people say he's a centrist, blending progressivism with traditional doctrine. Born in Chicago, so I have that in common.
Admirers of Charlie Kirk have been suggesting that his assassination will galvanise throngs of people to become more engaged in evangelical and Catholic churches. Evocations of Kirk-inspired religious fervour surfaced almost immediately after his death.
When the narrator tells people that all roads will lead to Rome, the papacy has skillfully re-engineered her global image and has groomed those in the entertainment world to expand her cause that will make your average person who are obsessed with celebrities to put down their guard.
A little comedy at the Vatican this week, where more than 100 comedians from around the world were invited by Pope Francis himself. Our pal Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert, Chris Rock, Julia Louis-Dreyfus among the Americans there on Friday. The Pope telling the group, quote, "You managed to make people smile even while dealing with problems and events large and small."
On September 13th, stream the historic concert celebration live from Vatican City with Pharrell Williams and Voices of Fire, Andrea Bocelli, Karol G, and John Legend. Grace for the World.
To stand here in this holy place with my fellow artists, world leaders, and all of you beautiful souls, my humblest and sincerest thanks. First and foremost, I want to sincerely thank His Holiness Pope Leo for opening the doors to this sacred place to us all and reminding us that true compassion and grace begin with fraternity, seeing one another as brothers and sisters, and fellow human beings and fellow siblings.
American musician Pharrell Williams has been credited as one of the most influential producers in popular modern music. His fashion brand and style is definitely leaning people into the rainbow community. His performance at the Disney Plus and Hulu streamed Grace for the World concert that also included other celebrities in Vatican City for the Third World Meeting on Human Fraternity and the celebration of the 2025 Jubilee year for so-called world peace, was not the first time that he performed for the papacy. With the reopening of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, France in the year 2024, another papal celebrity invitee festival, Pharrell Williams and other musicians performed his chart-topping hit, Happy. So you can get an impression on how vast the papacy's influence is. But why is this modern generation so sucked into celebrity worship? Do they even know what these individuals stand for? Well, the narrator who spent 5 years of his life studying media in both college and in university will give you a background on how the global media works. In 1977, there were clashes in the UK by two groups over the issue of, guess what? Immigration. Nothing new. But guess what? Instead of the presenter choosing sides, he was balanced. He asked the leader of the far-right National Front if the actions by his group helped stoke racial tensions. And he also asked the chairman of the anti-fascist Socialist Workers' Party did he think his group's behavior was responsible for stoking the riots. You see, this is true journalism. You don't choose sides, you hear both of the arguments. An art which is sadly lost. But what do we get today? The narrator always tells people, if you want to understand how the game works, then follow the money. And everything will start to make sense. Harvard University is the oldest institution of higher learning in the United States of America, with students coming from all over the world to study in its halls, where it has been ranked as one of the most prestigious universities in the world. Two of its former students impact the world. They are the American billionaire businessman and so-called philanthropist and co-founder of Microsoft Corporation, Bill Gates, who dropped out of Harvard, and Mark Zuckerberg, the billionaire American businessman who founded Facebook and is the CEO of Meta, who also dropped out of Harvard. Now, Mark Zuckerberg's Meta has been helpful as it has helped people rekindle long-lost friendships that had been lost for years. But they also dabble into domestic politics and global affairs. Meta has been instrumental in winning the first Trump presidency to help him gain the power of the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. Not only does its algorithms manipulate its users' emotions, which was a very clever experiment on the psychology of human behavior, which critics observe breach ethical guidelines, but it stoked conflicts that led to protests in Colombia, and it also helped recruit rebels in Colombia also. It has also been accused of stoking the conflict in Ethiopia also. So its influence is downplayed but very broad globally. Now, Bill Gates' influence is a bit more vast and very cleverly controlled. Through his Gates Foundation, he can control how the media is marketed to the public, manipulating how you view the world. These are the companies he bankrolls: Al Jazeera Media Network, NBC Universal Media LLC, NPR, that is National Public Radio Inc., and CNN.com. Now, in the UK, the BBC confirms that one of its funders is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The Independent newspaper receives funding from them. The Telegraph newspaper Media Group Holdings Limited, the Financial Times, And the London Guardian also receives funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as confirmed from both of their websites. But the Guardian also receives funding from other sources. Now, George Soros is a Hungarian-American billionaire who finances many different causes. And every time the narrator looks at his eyes, it reminds him of a creature he used to watch as a child. But with his Open Society Foundation, he also bankrolls The Guardian, as they also confirm from their own site. So everything is open to the public to see. Now, the government also closely studies and targets influencers in social media. And if they realize you can be brought, they will wean you in, such as these TikTokers who are with the former US President Joe Biden seated in the center. And they were used by the government to sway young people's attitude to the side of the deep state, where they were screened by the White House according to Fox News, where they were briefed on how to take their message to a younger audience to help sway public opinion over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Yep, not only is a dark money group secretly funding high-profile Democrat influencers, but right-wing influencers are turning to foreign affairs also, perfectly aligning themselves with the techno-fascist agenda. Now, one famous influencer is a former Mormon and an Emmy Award winner, YouTuber and filmmaker by the name of Johnny Harris. His videos are very cutting edge with high quality imagery and maps, raking in millions of hits. But then he gave himself away in one of his videos titled How China Became So Powerful. Near the end of the video, he recommended his viewers to read a book by who? Klaus Schwab, the man who was the head of the World Economic Forum. And this same video is highly recommended on the site of the World Economic Forum. So the powers that be target influencers, and if you are controlled by the three things that leads to the destruction of strong men: money, according to 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 10, women, according to Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 26, who will hunt you down, and fame and self-worship, according to Daniel chapter 4 and verse 30. If any one of these three things dominate you, you will never be able to function properly and will be ineffective. So whether you want to accept it or not, we are all drawn into this digital space, especially by our phones. And we are unconsciously and sometimes consciously being controlled by the cleverly timed algorithmic manipulating our naivety and vulnerability, which has also been mapped out, the narrator will explain. In the 2013 film Her, about a man who develops a relationship with a female AI voice, the film actually said, according to critics that closely observed it, that this technology will be universally used by the year 2025. Interesting. Which is not a coincidence, for this was the year when the technology called conversational language interface grew, which people are now using with the AI tools of ChatGPT and Google's Gemini. And the narrator discovered the reason people, both in the church and in the world, can be sucked into an event without doing any background research on the topic. Look how the media works. In the summer of 2025, a horror film was released called Weapons, which some of its apologists said it was all about trauma. Yeah, right. It revolved around a parasitic witch called Gladys, who uses spells on people and uses these same people as weapons, where she drains their life force of those under her spell so she can remain younger and stay in control. She takes an item of yours, kind of like Obio or Voodoo, and then she rings a bell, and then you turn into her weapon and attack people unaware that you are under a spell. Most of the film revolves around a young boy where she had his parents under a spell, but she wanted more energy and power. So she made him take the labels of all of his classmates. She tore them up, made a potion, she rang a bell, And at 2:17 a.m. in the morning, 17 children in that young boy's class just ran out of their homes into the middle of the night like they were in a trance into the basement of this home. And nobody could explain how these children just left. Now near the end of the film, the young boy broke the witch's spell, and those 17 children ran out of the basement and ran after that witch for keeping them in a trance and a spell. And the ending scene, which is quite graphic and very gruesome, for they ripped her completely to pieces. Now the narrator can see that even people who you thought were a bit more wise are under a spell. All they have to do is ring the bell, and they are training people to become these Frankenstein images of the state, these simulant brainwashed synthetics, these cloned Tyrone creatures to defend the ideologies and vile ideas of a famous individual or ideas of the state. And most are unaware that they are being set up.
They were born to be criminals, and they're tough and mean, and they'll cut your throat, and they won't even think about it the next day.
Happening all the time in urban America. Prowling blacks go around for fun to go target white people. That's a fact. It's happening more and more.
In a recent episode of the King's Hall podcast entitled The Girl on the Train, we talked about the tragic and brutal murder of Irina Zaruska in Charlotte. A few days after that episode released, we cut and released this short clip. Let's say that somebody was coming into our church and they're black, and would they be eligible for membership in our church? Yes, they of course they would. They'd be eligible for membership in our church. But would they be permitted to participate in, embody, and practice what I would call black culture generally in our church? The answer is absolutely not. Why? Because the characteristics that mark black culture as a generalization, in the same way Paul's talking about Cretans on Crete, they are evil, murderous, violent, bestial people. They steal, they kill, they destroy. They are sinful to the core. They have besetting sins that are like fatherlessness, sexual immorality. They molest children at a high rate. All of any criminal statistic that you could look at, almost pretty much without exception, they excel at them.
And this stabbing, another thing, that this horrible, wicked black man, and he was a black man, own up to it, just it's science, it's logic. He was a black man. There's a problem with blacks against whites in America. And his poor girl from Ukraine comes walking in, and she sits down in front of him, and he pulls out his pocket knife, opens it up, and stabs her in the neck, and then walks off. And he's going, I got that white girl. I got that white girl. And the news media is saying, I don't think it was racially motivated. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. A lot of us whites have been victimized by black racism over the years.
Today on the Matt Walsh Show, a career criminal savagely murders a Ukrainian refugee on a train in Charlotte. The media refuses to cover the story. I'll give you one guess why that's the case. I'm talking about all the videos of black career felons, violent thugs who should have been executed a very long time ago, murdering white people in public places for no apparent reason whatsoever.
The breaking news of this new footage we have of the stabbing murder of the 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee, Irina Zaruska, a young white lady who was stabbed to death by a black criminal.
Since the very first election, the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, by labeling blacks as criminals from birth, he has emboldened those very deeply insecure men who are all members of the church, who see themselves as victims. They all mention that innocent young Ukrainian woman who sadly lost her life on a train by a convicted felon, and they all stressed his racial identity. The narrator is deeply sad that this woman and many women lose their lives, but something else was overlooked. Just a month before, a black police officer, just a few months into his job, his name was David Rose, was shot and killed while defending a federal building. The narrator observed that most of the news channels who reported his death had black presenters that covered his death. His funeral was attended by 500 fellow police officers, but something was a bit odd. There was no outcry, President Trump said nothing in public about this murder. No condolences to the family by a man protecting a CDC building who left behind 2 children and a third on the way. There was no presidential medal or congressional moment of silence or a lowered flag at the White House. The shooter was a white male who came from a, guess what, 2-parent home, and something was quite interesting. The London Guardian reported and said that US politicians' silence concerning David Rose's death is deafening. Why didn't any of these professed Christian YouTubers or any of these ministries mention him in their racial tirade? There's a reason. The narrator discovered a West Indian intellect by the name of Hubert Harrison. He was real bright, but oh Lord, was he deeply anti-religious. But there was a reason for it when he carefully studied the structure of the United States of America. In his book titled The Negro and the Nation, he closely observed what the root cause of racism in America was. And he said, quote, "It has been well said that the 2 great instruments for the propagation for race prejudice in America are the Associated Press, that is the media, and who else? The Christian Church. This is quite true." He said that Protestant Christian America literally created the color line or racial division in America. First witness. Now, Leonard Leo, in his lecture at the Catholic Information Center, presented the Catholic Church as being historical victims in America, but he cleverly missed out a huge chunk of history. Harvard-educated, the late W.E.B. Du Bois wrote a letter to a member of the Catholic clergy in the United States by the name of Joseph B. Glenn in 1925, and he boldly said from the second line that the Catholic Church in America stands for color separation and discrimination to a degree equaled by no other church in America, and that is saying a very great deal. Second witness. 100 years later, in the year 2025, has anything actually changed among both the Catholic and Protestant churches in America? Nope. The New Yorker in the year 2020 said that American Christianity has a white supremacy problem, and it is rooted in its history, and the narrator will stress its warped unbiblical theology and its culture, where it is embedded in the church, in their very psychology. NBC News said racism is far higher among white Christians than it is among non-believers. The legacy of this unholy union, as highlighted in blue, still lives in what? The DNA of white Christianity today. And not just among white evangelicals in the South, but also among the Catholic Church. They're both the same. Our fellow Americans, and indeed the entire country, are waiting to see whether we, white Christians, can find the humility and courage and love to face the truth. You'll be waiting for a very long time. In public opinion polls, a clear pattern has emerged. White Christians are consistently more likely than whites who are religiously unaffiliated to deny the existence of structural racism. But what exactly is racism? For it is a word that has not been clearly defined in recent times. Is it individual or institutional? Well, let's see. Racism or racialism, according to the Reader's Digest Encyclopedic Dictionary, is the belief in the superiority of a particular race, as highlighted in yellow. But how is it reinforced? By a social or what? Political, and look at the word underlined, system that is based on this. Now, if you ever purchased the books The Bible Told Them So, Jesus and John Wayne, White Evangelical Racism, and one titled The Family that a Netflix show is about, you'll see that white Christians have always controlled the United States of America and have always been deeply racist. While these YouTubers' words may have been shocking to some, Charles Colcock Jones Sr., the 19th century US educator and Presbyterian missionary, in his book titled Religious Instructions to the Negroes, on page 104, he said that blacks are naturally criminals from birth. So Trump and those other influencers were not bringing any new concept to the table. Now, the Washington Post in January 2015 said that the US Congress is 80% white, 80% male, and 92% Christian. Interesting. The following year, in the New York Times in 2016, it said that the majority of people who hold the sway of power in the United States are nearly all white. Then in 2020, the New York Times confirmed that 80% of those in power are, guess what, white. And if there are individuals who feel that system will be threatened, then they will speak out boldly.
In fact, you know, if we would have said 3 weeks ago, Blake, if we would have said that Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the racist. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously.
Black women do not have brain processing power to be taken seriously. But if you go and watch the clip, the very clip she links to, you realize he never said anything like that. He never uttered those words.
He did not say anywhere on this clip, as some have suggested, as the younger black woman in the earlier clip suggested, that black women in general, all black women, do not have the brain processing power that white people do or anything like that. He never said that.
When the Silicon Valley funded former employee of billionaire Peter Thiel, the first millennial to become the Vice President of the United States of America, J.D. Vance, became a posthumous Charlie Kirk apologist, a leading figure and fierce opponent of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but who fails to declare to the public that not only does his mother-in-law promote DEI, but he benefited from it also while a student at Yale University Law School. And when the Dallas Theological Seminary educated Christian preacher Alan Parr also became a Charlie Kirk apologist, you are seeing in microcosm form just a small taste of what's to come. Church and state both speaking with one voice. It is interesting that people with common sense outside of the religious echo chamber could instantly detect that this billionaire-backed activist cleverly used religion for political motives. And most people still struggle to understand what racism is and how it functions. They think that it is about making monkey noises, the use of the N-word, microaggression, or the coded or suggestive political language of the dog whistle. But it is a lot more broad than that. Racism is a deeply embedded historical system of institutional power and control backed by legal authority that shapes our worldview daily, and its ideas are reinforced in advertising, films, textbooks, fashion, video games, politics, religion, education, facial recognition, algorithms, and in artificial intelligence, better known as AI. It also sets the standard of beauty for the world. And those who don't fit that criteria in an influential space, well, the global backlash is very, very brutal indeed.
Something about you seems different. I can't quite figure it out.
She got legs, you idiot.
Especially in the demographics where the multi-billion-dollar skin lightening industry rakes in its highest revenue in Asia, where in many parts of that region, people are still unconsciously attached to the ideas of their former colonial masters. Now, if you just read the many articles in response to the 2023 film called The Little Mermaid, you get a reality check on how deep-rooted people's attitudes are to a specific racial group of people. The narrator also received a phone call from a man of European descent who said that there are white Christians in the UK who are complaining that in both advertisements and in films that there is too much of an overrepresentation and diversity of different ethnic groups, and they are promoting too many interracial relationships and mixed families on the screen. Now, these are the thoughts of professed Christians, not people of the secular world. Now, to be fair, the narrator will confess that even black people have complained about the latter, but that's prejudice, not racism, because it holds no power. Whites can put their ideas into legislation. That's the difference. When Denzel Washington said, "We can't blame the system for our boys going into crime, but the family unit," his Jesuit education in Fordham University limited him on how the system works. By looking at the behavioral science of Eurocentric psychology only, and coming from the standpoint and conclusion that it is the family unit alone that is the root cause of society's ills and woes, is limiting yourself. A much more complex approach is needed. Yes, we are definitely influenced by our families, either positive or negative, which is where our first stages of development and ideas come from. But we are also shaped by our friendships, our social environments that includes our workspace. And if we are unfortunate, we can get caught up into the wrong crowd in crime. Now let us look at the many different things that shape our characters. In a book titled Reflections on Violence by George Sorel, this French social thinker said, quote, "It is the family which influences all social relationships, but that's not the only influence." In a book titled The Crowd, a study of the popular mind, another Frenchman, Charles-Marie Gustave Le Bon, talks of another influence, and he said, quote, "Men are ruled by what? Ideas, number 1, sentiments, and also customs, number 3, matters which are the essence of ourselves. Institutions and laws are the what? Outward manifestations of our character." And adding on to the words of that French writer, the West Indian American writer Hubert Harrison said, quote, "The order in which human relations are established are what? Listen. Economic, social, political, and civic." So it's not just the family. But there has been an ongoing battle in both the secular academic world and within the Western theological seminary world to divert people's minds away from looking at the function of a corporate, structural, and institutional system. It is a word coined in the 1830s by Owenite utopian socialists. It is called individualism, where the state takes no responsibility, for it is all the individual's fault. Now, according to Virtue's English Dictionary, the Encyclopedic Edition, individualism is a system or condition in which each individual works for his own ends in either social, political, or religious matters. Now, finding works or books that cover the concept of individualism is no easy task. but the narrator did stumble across two publications that briefly touch on it. One is from a Pan-Africanist perspective, and another from a very well-balanced academic perspective. The late Amos Nelson Wilson was an American psychologist and lecturer who was literally the embodiment of the true meaning of the word woke, for he specialized in behavioral science and its effect on black people. And in his book titled The Falsification of African Consciousness, Eurocentric History, Psychiatry and the Politics of White Supremacy, he said in a lecture, quote, "One of the ideologies, there are a number, but we will look at just one today, that is projected to maintain European dominance is the ideology of what? Individualism. First, witness." Now, Aaron Griffith is a US professor, and he was closely analyzing US evangelicals and their influence on the judicial and prison system in the United States of America. And he documented their influence in his first book titled God's Law and Order, The Politics of Punishment in Evangelical America. And he came across two influential preachers, the infamous People's President Confidant, the late Billy Graham, and another preacher, the late David Wilkinson. They both promoted individualism, and he documented that these men and others would overlook segregation and something that still damages and haunts the black community in the United States of America to this very day, redlining, a policy in America that discriminates in housing, and how banks would deny loans to people of color so that they couldn't uplift themselves. The modern day evangelical preachers today, just like the socialists of the 19th century, blamed individualism, not the system. And Aaron Griffith said, quote, "An individualistic anthropology flowed from the way evangelists framed their message about the Christian gospel. Individuals were the primary agents of God's salvation, not structures or institutions. The heart, not redlined neighborhoods or segregated school systems. Individual conversion of souls was the only true answer, not environmental change." Billy Graham, when promoting the idea of individualism, said that our great problem today is not what? Social. Our problem is man himself. David Wilkinson said you can't blame parents or your what? Environment, or use any pathetic excuses of psychiatrists. You must feel the guilt, admit you are in darkness, and that you are condemned and unable to save yourself. Second, witness. Another proponent of individualism is Jordan Peterson, the Canadian psychiatrist, author, and media commentator. He cleverly tries to downplay the effect of the corporate, structural, and institutional system, and he documents his ideas in his book, which is 490 pages long. It is called 12 Rules for Life. And instead of him critiquing the effect the Western world has for its role in global affairs, he said, quote, "Don't blame capitalism, the radical left, or the iniquity of your enemies. Don't reorganize the state until you have ordered your own experience. Have some humility. If you cannot bring peace to your household, how dare you try to rule a city? Let your own soul guide you. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world." That's individualism. Now, this westernized worldview of individualism definitely does not harmonize with God's worldview and the Holy Scriptures, for God deals with individual sin, corporate sin, and the effect of systemic, structural institutions. Now in Exodus chapter 20 and verse 12 in the Ten Commandments, God says that if we honor our parents, it will lead to the longevity of life. So there is a blessing in obedience. In Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 6, that honor to the parents can only work if the parents train us properly. For in Colossians chapter 3 and verse 21, God instructs the fathers that you must be loving and gentle with your children. If not, it can lead to a life of psychological damage to your own children. 1 Samuel chapter 3 verses 12 and 13. God is very clear that if men don't rule their own house properly, like the priest Eli, then your children will definitely cause havoc in the community and in society. And you'll bear a lot of the responsibility for that behavior if you have not corrected your children properly. In Ezekiel chapter 18 and verse 20, 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 10, and James chapter 1 verses 14, 15 and 16, God makes it very clear that we all have to give an account for our individual actions while we lived this one life on this earth. So when we stand before the judgment seat of Christ, we will have to give an account as to what we did on this earth. And that is why 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 33 and Proverbs chapter 13 and verse 20, God instructs us to be careful of the company that we keep, because sometimes unknowingly it can have an effect on our behavior. In Daniel chapter 9 and verse 16, we are introduced to corporate and generational sin, where the city Jerusalem, which is a system, there was not only a confession of individual sins, but also corporate sin also. The unbroken chains of the iniquities of the forefathers. Now in 2 Chronicles chapter 33 verses 9 and 10, it shows us the influence of the actions of the head of state on his nation, where the inhabitants wanted to continue in the dark behavior that was even worse than the behavior of the surrounding nations. But in 2 Chronicles chapter 17 verses 9 and 10, it shows us that when you have a godly environment, as a result of a true revival of reading the Word of God, it not only positively impacts your community, but the surrounding communities also. So that shows that our environment has an effect on our behavior, and that shuts down the individualism argument. Your environment does affect your behavior and attitude. Now, Jesus tells us in Matthew chapter 11 and verse 24 that the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, also called a land, was a system. And in Ezekiel chapter 16 verses 49 and 50, this culture negatively impacted its people. They were idle, prideful, full of bread, but did not look after the poor, and they committed abominations. So we are impacted by our environment. In Revelation chapter 18 and verse 4, the very last message to God's people all over the world is to come out of the spiritual Babylonian system mentioned in the previous chapter, chapter 17. And it specifically says that ye be not partakers of her sins. That's corporate influence. 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 22 also instructs us not to partake in other people's sins. Now, how do you partake in other people's sins? Well, it's simple. Romans chapter 1 and verse 32 says that if you have pleasure in them that do them, you are partaking in other people's sins. Don't forget that in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 21, Jesus says whatever we dwell and focus on, that is where our hearts are really at. So the Holy Scriptures is clear that there is individual sin, corporate sin, and that we live in a structural and institutionalized system.
Look, the city of Chicago, we are truly the greatest city in the world. From 20% of the world's fresh water in our front yard between Lake Michigan and the St. Lawrence River. We have one of the most diverse economies in the world where not one industry comprises of more than 20% of our overall GDP. Our airports, and particularly O'Hare, we set and break records every single day. We have some of the top universities anywhere in the world, the top labor force. In fact, with the development that's happening in Chicago right now, we're talking about $20 billion of new revenue coming into our region from tourism. We're seeing unprecedented levels of violence reduction in our city. Homicides are down 30%. Shootings and shooting victims are down 35%. There's more work to be done, but we are truly building the safest, most affordable big city in America. In fact, Condé Nast rated us the best big city in America 8 years in a row, 13 years consecutively as the #1 relocator for corporate headquarters. And so we have a great workforce, a great university system, a diverse economy, and of course, most of all, we have amazing people in our city. Many Chicagoans were shocked and appalled to see videos of heavily armed, masked federal agents in our streets yesterday. The reality is that this stunt has nothing to do with public safety. This is about politics, money, and power. The president is using his militarized force the exact way he intended to advance his political goals. He wants to militarize our cities, whether that's through ICE or through the National Guard or the United States Army or Armed Forces.
Firing the first ever black woman appointed to the U.S. Federal Reserve's Board of Governors. Now, ostensibly, it's because Donald Trump wants his way on a malleable central bank that would lower interest rates at his command. But why single out Lisa Cook? Similarly, it's in the name of lowering the crime rate that the U.S. president's bent on deploying federal troops to major cities. But is it also because the likes of Chicago, Washington, Baltimore are opposition strongholds whose mayors just happen to be African American?
And I told Pete, we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military, because we're going into Chicago very soon. That's a big city.
The words that Donald Trump used today, enemy from within, that's Hitler-esque. That is right out of Nazi Germany. That is not constitutional speech. That is not the speech that we stand for in this country, where we believe in the rule of law. And the way that he talks about cities, that cities are full of his enemies. Why? Because they voted for Democrats. They voted blue. And so they have become his enemies.
Even though the current mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, as of this recording in late 2025, said that the crime rate had gone down in Chicago by 35%. That included murders. With Leonard Leo's Federalist Society picks to the US Supreme Court, this Catholic conservative majority has given President Donald Trump immunity, which technically means he can more or less do as he pleases. And when you call black men criminals from birth, then he wants to use the military to control them on his orders, then that is racism, because he has legal authority and institutional power to enact out his prejudices. But there is something the narrator has also found a bit disturbing. When the narrator wants to get his mind into a spiritual space, he will listen to the songs of Zion and, at times, for some upliftment, a sermon. But the narrator is realizing that a lot of preachers who once preached solid Bible prophecy, these are men of European descent, are now teaching a racialized, patriotic nationalism. The narrator will explain. Spanish conquistador and soldier Bernal Díaz del Castillo, in his book Conquest of New Spain, openly details how the Spanish uprooted and colonized the Aztec Empire in Central America, and Bartolomé de las Casas, the Spanish Dominican friar in the Caribbean. In a short account of the destruction of the Indies, documents how utterly destructive and brutal the Spanish conquest of the Americas was by the colonists, where they wiped out whole communities. Now you would think that would be a clear object lesson. Not at all. In central London, in Belgrave Square, among a number of foreign embassies, is a statue of the Spanish Catholic monarch-sponsored Italian navigator and explorer, Christopher Columbus. The narrator will not go into details of his abuses logged in his diaries, but a preacher said in his sermon that the narrator was listening to that Christopher Columbus opened the doors for Europeans to evangelize in the Americas. Now that's a fabrication of history. Now this painting from the 19th century presents the Pilgrim Fathers of 1620 as a persecuted religious minority seeking freedom in the Americas. But Edward Winslow, who was on board the Mayflower ship in 1620, in his own work said, as documented in Even the Door study, How to Avoid Deception Part 2, that the reason why they landed in the Americas was to expand the British Empire. The narrator has closely observed that there was no difference between both Catholic and Protestant nations when enslaving black Africans and in colonizing Amerindian lands. The narrator will explain. In London's Victoria and Albert Museum, there is a bust of the French Catholic monarch King Louis XIV, called the Sun King and the longest reigning monarch in history. He wanted to expand his vast French empire, so with his Jesuit advisor he colonized parts of the Americas, introduced the black clothes and slavery there, and the place where his colonists expanded his empire is still named after him, the state of Louisiana. But the Protestants were no different, for they are one of the many daughters of that harlot woman. In London's Tower Hill there is a church called All Hallows by the Church Tower, and in the year 1644 a man was baptized in there, and a plaque on the church has his name written on it, William Penn, who was an English Protestant Quaker. William Penn received the endorsement of the English Stuart monarch King Charles II to occupy Native American land. Now the narrator is not aware and is not skilled in the meetings between the Native Americans and this Quaker colonist, who allowed slavery on this new colony. But the state of Pennsylvania is named after William Penn. But who laid the foundation for global Western expansionism that covered the entire world? Let's see. Now in the British Museum is a coin of the man who introduced Western colonialism. His name was Pope Alexander VI, the man that divided the whole world between Spain and Portugal and told them to colonize it as they pleased. Now when you read Daniel chapter 11 verses 36, 39 and 43, God forewarns his people of the last global world power and details that it will colonize other people's lands in verse 39 and take their wealth that included their gold by force as documented in verse 43. Now there was a time when true Holy Spirit led students of prophecy clearly identified Papal Rome as the world's last power, and it wasn't a debate. She has the oldest and the most vast diplomatic network on the earth, and men were once aware of it. Let us show our receipts with 3 witnesses. In a book titled The History of the Scottish Nation in Scotland, the man nicknamed the Thundering Scot, John Knox, said, quote, "A short discourse of the 4 empires in the prophetic book of Daniel, the Babylonian, the Persian, that of the Greeks, and the 4th of the Romans, that last beast or kingdom which he affirmed to be the Roman Church. First witness. In a book titled Daniel by John Calvin, this Swiss-based French reformer, continuing this school of thought, said, quote, "The four monarchies following each other in succession, the Babylonian, Persian, Macedonian or Greek and Roman monarchies. Second witness." In a book titled How Are We Complete in Christ, one of the least known English intellectuals, the Cambridge and Oxford educated scholar William Whittaker, said, "The four great successive monarchies, Chaldean, Persian, Grecian, Roman. Third witness." Now, if we look at our world today, it is modeled perfectly on feudalistic medieval papal controlled Europe, where just as neighbors were encouraged to spy on each other during the Spanish Inquisition, today not only do intelligence agencies and states spy on their innocent civilians, but every minute on YouTube they are advertising apps that you can download where you can track the exact location of either your family or friends just by having their number in your phone. This is how far things have gone. But how close is the tech community to Papal Rome? Well, the late Arn Panula was an American Catholic priest. Your average person knows very little of him, as he was the director of the Catholic Information Center in Washington, D.C. But according to the Catholic News Agency, he was the former U.S. head and vicar of Opus Dei, who also lived with the founder of Opus Dei. But who was this Harvard University alumni priest very close with? Guess who? Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance's financial mentor, the man who helps finance US elections. And in the book titled Opus, this is all documented, for it says, quote, "Father Arn Panula was a very big figure within Opus Dei and had become a very close friend of who? Peter Thiel, the billionaire who helped found PayPal and who had been an early investor in Facebook." Now, US commentator, influencer, and Catholic convert Candace Owens is given a revisionist history by a member of the Catholic clergy, where, like Leonard Leo, he presents the Catholic Church as this persecuted minority group during the Cold War. Do any real true modern historians bother to tell you that modern fascism started in Catholic Italy and received its full support by the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic clergy? Do they bother to tell you that the biggest attempt of taking over this world by men like Benito Mussolini, Francisco Franco, Adolf Hitler, and Croatia's Ante Pavelic received its fullest support by the papacy? Let us briefly look at where the narrator lives in the UK. One of the hot political topics is immigration. While people think it is Trump that stokes it, we have shown in this study that this has been ongoing for years. Media channels like GB News, called Britain's Fox News, fuels a lot of these sensitive topics. And who finances GB News and its right-wing views? Well, its biggest donor and co-owner is a man called Paul Marshall, who has been described as a hedge funder and a devout Christian. That is why it's so hard to preach the gospel. One of its hosts is one of the biggest anti-immigration activists, a man called Nigel Farage, who is promoting GB News' expansion in the United States of America, so that US citizens can have another Fox News in their watch list, which is being platformed by President Donald Trump's Trump media, as they both share the exact same views. But the other anti-immigrationist is a man who can rally up crowds, and he goes by the name of Tommy Robinson, who has a huge following. Now, the narrator will say again, anytime you see a man rising to the top of popularity ratings, always follow the money. For you cannot have this level of influence without being bankrolled by very big donors. That's how the game works. Now his staunch followers, that includes both black, white and Asian, say he can't be racist because he has black and Asian friends. But Jesus Christ says always watch the fruits, for that is how you will know them. Now in his anti-immigration march, it was supported by the man who financially bailed him out of jail, billionaire Elon Musk. But very few are not seeing the bigger picture because they're focusing too much on race. The immigration issue in the UK is really not to enforce IDs on immigrants, but to impose IDs on the entire population, which they plan to do worldwide. You see, you have to look at the bigger picture. But at Tommy Robinson's march to make England great again, even though 80% of the UK population is of white European descent who control everything, men were dressed like they were going to the Crusades. And who gave Tommy Robinson the biggest support and spiritual blessing? The papal hierarchy.
At the centre of it all, the anti-Islam activist Tommy Robinson. And what's newer too is the overt displays of Christian nationalism. When the crowd assembled, they were led in a chant of Christ as King, and then the Lord's Prayer.
Hallowed be thy name. Much of the outrage fueled by his tattoos, which include a symbol known as the Jerusalem cross on his chest, another saying Deus Vult, Latin for God wills it, and a common battle cry during the Crusades, the religious wars led by Catholics to convert Muslims a millennium ago. Those symbols also used by groups that associate with Christian identity.
Evangelical Christians are deeply embedded in the second Trump administration, including his cabinet. This is a culmination of a decades-long strategy that dates back to the 1980s, when the original megachurch pastor Jerry Falwell founded the Moral Majority, a now defunct conservative movement that for the first time put social and moral issues at the heart of US politics and helped put true believers at the heart of US power.
A new church has quietly opened here in Washington, just 3 blocks from the nation's capital. The Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth attended the first service. The church is part of the Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches, and its aim is global Christian domination under a strict interpretation of the Bible.
Wilson is part of a broader Christian nationalist movement making inroads with the Trump administration, with a newly created faith office led by evangelical pastor Paula White Cain, and people seen right outside the White House entrance praying and speaking in tongues.
We are standing on the soil of the White House, and we are declaring your word.
How precious! And now there's a monthly prayer service at the Pentagon, initiated by Hegseth, Wilson's highest level connection to the administration.
It's not organizationally tied to us, but it's the kind of thing we love to see.
For his part, Hegseth has publicly praised Wilson.
Now we're standing on the shoulders of a generation later, the Doug Wilsons and the others.
Once a fringe ideology, Christian nationalism is now reaching the nation's centers of power. Wilson has spoken at the National Conservatism Conference, where a rising number of government officials now appear. He's opened a branch of his church in D.C., expanding his global network of 150 churches.
From this moment forward, the only mission of the newly restored Department of War is this: war fighting. We are preparing every day. We have to be prepared for war, not for defense. We're training warriors, not defenders. We fight wars to win, not to defend. You kill people and break things for a living. Jesus said, do unto others that's what you would have done unto yourself. It's the ultimate simplifying test of truth.
The narrator has been asking a question in a few of his studies. Is the United States of America a lamb-like Christian nation? For the historical evidence and the scriptural language says no. And if you are a non-Christian and throughout this video you have seen religious men in one breath quote the Bible, then in another breath speak violent political, racial and military warlike colonial language, I'd like to tell you that this is not Christianity. For in John chapter 16 and verse 2, Jesus forewarned us of religious fanatics who would kill, and they blindly think they are doing it in God's service. And in Luke chapter 3 and verse 14, when the soldiers asked John the Baptist a question, he told them to be content with their wages and do violence to no man. I wonder if Pete Hegseth has read these texts. Now, to the Christians who are always looking for drama, spending hours fighting each other online, and always trying to find fault in others, well, we got some news for you. In the Church of God on Earth, says William Whitaker, there is a mixture of corn with chaff, of wheat with tears, of good fish with bad, of sheep with goats. So the church will always have the good ones who are faithful to the Lord and the bad ones who are faithful to the devil. But guess what is going to happen? Listen. There shall be a separation of the precious from the vile. Amen and hallelujah. And God will come with his fan in his hand at his second coming and thoroughly purge or cleanse his floor. So God is going to put all of this foolishness on earth to an end. That includes what takes place in his church. But back to the non-Christian. Let the narrator show you who Jesus Christ really is from his own words and from the historical data of the day. Let's go. In the British Museum in London, England, on display are 3 specific kings who are from 3 different demographics in Afro-Eurasia. The narrator has named them in previous studies, but this section is specifically for the unbelievers. There are kings in the Bible who are Tiberius Caesar, who ruled the Roman Empire in Europe, Sennacherib, the king of the Assyrian Empire in Asia, and Taharka, the king of the ancient Kushite kingdom in modern-day Sudan in Africa. Now, when they discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls in these caves in the 1940s, the most intact scroll was the Book of Isaiah. And the recent discoveries have unearthed that they found the seals of both the prophet Isaiah and Hezekiah, king of Judah. So we know that the book of Isaiah is not just a prophetic book, but historically accurate also. For it mentions the kings in the book of Isaiah, both Taharka and Sennacherib, who are both mentioned in the 37th chapter. The narrator is just laying the groundwork, for in the New Testament in Luke chapter 3 and verse 1, Tiberius Caesar, the head of the Roman Empire, is mentioned. And it was during his 15th year of his reign, which was 27 AD, that Jesus officially became the Messiah, which means the anointed one by the Holy Spirit. And when Jesus went into the synagogue after his baptism on the Sabbath day, Luke chapter 4 verses 17, 18 and 19 says that in verse 17 that he was given the book of Isaiah. Now in verse 21 of that chapter he made it clear that the divine prophetic text was talking about him. But listen to what the text says. Jesus said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me," which happened at his baptism, where he was anointed to do what? To preach the gospel to who? The poor. Now the narrator would like you to look at the words highlighted in blue. Jesus came to heal, to deliver, to recover, and to give liberty. So Jesus came to preach and to rebuild. And look at the words highlighted in green. Broken-hearted, captive, blind and bruised people, and to restore them back into the image of God. So to the non-Christian listening, this is who Jesus is and what he was about. But to the professed Christians out there, when you see deeply troubled and broken people, people who are struggling with low self-esteem or mental health, where life has not been too great for them, do you instantly judge them like the Pharisees, or do you love them in Jesus' name? the narrator will confess that there are many times he walks past the homeless and feels guilty. But how often do you help the poor or the needy? They could be even your own family or friends. How often do you help those who are crying out for help? And if not, the narrator would like to ask a very personal question. Which Jesus do you actually follow? The one of the Bible or the one your denomination created and made up? Because these are the disturbing messages coming from the prominent so-called ministers today of the gospel.
The richest black people on God's green earth are African Americans. If slavery never happened, then you would be in a grass hut.
Yeah.
Right? Well, we need reparations. Your reparations are that you get to live in America. You're welcome. You're welcome.
You get to have the Christian religion.
That's
live
right.
better than your ancestors.
The greatest moment in history for any brown or black country is the moment that the white man's ships arrive on your shore.
Joel Webben is a Texas-based pastor of the Covenant Bible Church, whose YouTube channel is Right Response Ministries. His unbiblical, ahistorical, racial, colonial ideas are no different from the late Charlie Kirk and all the so-called professed Christian ministries you have heard throughout this video. And as this video from a channel called Church Dropout so eloquently put it, he openly says what most say quietly. And the reason why there is no opposition or silence in the white churches is because they are totally complicit and in agreement with his views. Just look at the opening video on Joel Webben's Right Response Ministries YouTube channel and you'll see some prominent faces in Christian spaces, like the Reformed Baptist theologian and online debater, the infamous James Robert White. Guess what? Birds of a feather shall flock together. But as the narrator showed early in the study, the Make America Great Again MAGA Christian nationalist movement shockingly also has prominent conservative black supporters also, like Calvin Robinson, the US-based British Anglican priest, political commentator and broadcaster, who is preaching in Right Response Ministries, and also the late Pastor Vodi Bochin Jr., who was nothing more than an apologist for the 1776 experiment called the United States of America. This racial superiority mindset is very deep-rooted indeed, for if you look at the videos of the Gates Foundation, the white savior narrative, which is saving poor black Africans, is dominant in Bill Gates' so-called philanthropy work. And if you sit down and carefully watch Christian channels, the same narrative persists. Every time you hear a man or woman say that they want to evangelize to the entire world, they always seem to end up in Africa, where they believe they have to save these dark black heathens from eternal hell. Now, whenever the narrator and others are in a black space, whether it be in the barbers or a bookshop or on the streets, they all say that black Christians are the most naive, stupid, brainwashed set of black people on the earth, who continue to psychologically defend the continuing plantation system. And when they see prominent black figures defending Charlie Kirk within the churches, they literally think that these blacks have lost their mind. And the narrators also watch videos of white atheists who are totally shocked that blacks are defending people who can't even stand them. Well, the narrator will explain why. The word token, according to the Reader's Digest Great Encyclopedic Dictionary, is, as highlighted in yellow, a thing serving to authenticate a person or a message. And all you have to do is ring the bell and create these Western colonial minded weapons for the state. And there are a number of token blacks in the English-speaking world who use their platforms to ridicule their own race. Now, we're not saying that there are not issues or problems that the black community has to deal with, but they are totally unaware that they are being used by the system. But the more that they are being praised is the more money and the more fame they will get. Now, a few of them of recent have clicked that when you speak out against that system you are defending and step outside of your lane, then they will show their true colors and you'll be quietly removed from the public eye. But most of them deny that there is any evidence that structural racism still exists. But there are some questions that go unanswered. Why are women of black African descent in both the United States of America and in the United Kingdom dying at the highest rate than any other group in childbirth? Now, why is that? Why does the medical industry have a lack of care for black women, not interested if a child is born without its mother? And why is it that the narrator knows a black woman who encourages black women to always have a doula during pregnancy and childbirth? And why is it that 2 centuries after the abolition of slavery, though we have shown that black men greatly invest into their children in both the UK and in the United States, they are the highest to be harassed by the police more than any other ethnic group, and are also deeply traumatized when they are dehumanized. Why don't any of these Uncle Ruckus token blacks address these issues? Well, you have to study how the slave plantation system continues to function.
In Africa, my people are born free. That's right. Free men, not slaves.
In the film Mandingo, we get an object lesson and are schooled on how a slave plantation is run. To keep black people in line, whites would use fear and brutality so they don't rebel against the system, which is why most blacks don't make a stand against injustice, because of fear. They would turn blacks against each other so there would be no unity among them, like today when you see black or African Americans, West Indians and indigenous Africans constantly fighting against each other in the digital space. They are just keeping the plantation system going. They saw blacks as nothing more as property, where they fetishized their body and treated them as hypersexual creatures. And blacks were seen as nothing more than laborers and entertainers. What's changed? If you were loyal to the system, they would love you. You could even profit and become wealthy from that system. But if you ever stepped out of line, questioned the system, and interfered with the natural order of things, you would see the true nature of those who carefully manage the system if you interfere with their self-interests. Question: is the plantation system still functioning?
Laura Blacklock. I'm Richard. So pleased to have you with us.
Thank you.
Laura here is an award-winning journalist. She's doing a piece for us on the foundation. I know this is an unusual approach to charity. 3 days on a luxury yacht.
Laura here's going to be spying on us.
The world awaits with bated breath.
Why would you be targeted?
To kill me. To silence me. I saw last night.
There's nothing to be embarrassed about, Laura. You were convinced what you saw was real?
It was real.
These people run the world. Dodge them off.
Now, one of the overall objectives and aims of Even Out the Doors is to keep people updated and aware of what is going on in the world in the light of the Holy Scriptures. The narrator is becoming fully aware that the modern arts is breaking down people's resistance to evil. But you have to constantly keep people aware so that they can choose in which direction they want to go in the future. the narrator can see that the entertainment industry under the newly revived CIA media-controlled Project Mockingbird is setting people up to believe that America is the world's savior, when Revelation chapter 13 verses 11 to 18 details exactly what it is doing, and the narrator is aware that there will be opposition when you expose this system. So he would like to school you on a number of arguments that will be used to counteract the truth. The first one is what the narrator calls the Ahab complex, where in 1 Kings chapter 16 verses 30 and 33, the Hebrew monarch Ahab continued a rebellious quasi-religious idolatrous system, but it was worse. And his wife Jezebel in 1 Kings chapter 18 and verse 4 ethnically cleansed those who posed a threat to the state. And when the prophet Elijah addressed it in 1 Kings chapter 18 and verse 17, King Ahab used reverse psychology and said, "You're the troublemaker. You're the racist. You're the one who is always going on about race." It's a clever tactic to shut you down. That's the Ahab complex. Another title you'll be labeled with if you think outside of the box is a conspiracy theorist, as shown in a previous study. That label, like the modern misapplication of the word woke, is designed to make you look stupid, especially if your influence is impacting people to think outside of the box. Another clever tactic to disarm people is used by the US Senator Bernie Sanders. This is a clever method where he portrays himself as a people's person, but then he gets very defensive when black issues are brought up, where he says, look, it is not about race, it is about class. Now across the pond in the UK there are black Brits who have also embraced this clever narrative to downplay and to disarm the black struggle. But guess where that argument comes from? Have you ever read or heard of the 1848 book titled The Communist Manifesto by the Germans Marx and Engels? That term is right out that playbook, where this Marxist idea says on the very first page, quote, "The history of all hitherto society is the history of what? Class struggles." The narrator had to read Karl Marx when in university while studying media, so he understands the arguments. Now there are others who argue that we should stay far away from politics, but how will that work? For in a book titled Catholic Power Today, Ava Manhattan said that whatever religious stance you take on an issue, your choices will still affect both you and the society that you live in. He said, quote, "The Catholic Church, notwithstanding her latest concessions in the field, basically objects to birth control, mostly on religious principles. These have created a moral problem, which by its very nature is also an ethical one. And since the ethics of the individual affect the society of which he is a member, the Church's religious objection is automatically converted into a social issue. Social problems are the responsibility of society. But since society is controlled by a government, and a government is made or unmade by political factors, the original religious objection to birth control has become a political problem, affecting other related problems in practically all strata of contemporary society at a national or an international level. So you can't avoid politics. Now, if you are a professed Christian and someone asked you, what do you think of same-sex marriage? Would you marry a gay couple? Are you going to say, well, I don't get involved in politics? If someone says, are these global digital IDs in some way connected to the mark of the beast? Are you going to tell them, look, I don't get involved in politics? The reality is, you can't escape it. Now, the churches have also been trained to avoid and tiptoe around sensitive topics. And when you bring up subjects that makes them uncomfortable, these are the tactics they use. The narrator labels it the Garden of Eden syndrome, where, like Adam and Eve, instead of acknowledging their failures, they blame the adversary. Oh, they say, Satan is a liar. The devil is attacking the church, but they refuse to acknowledge their part in assisting in his madness. That's the first tactic. The second one is, oh, let's pray. Whenever a Christian is cornered, to deflect from the issue, they cleverly resort to prayer. Now, this is a clever cop-out, for the Holy Scripture says that we must be praying without ceasing. It must be consistent. But this is a clever move to take you off guard. The third and last method that they will use is they will say, look, let's just focus on prophecy. So we are encouraged to look to the future, but ignore the realities of the present world that we live in. Now, the narrator is going to be very harsh and blunt. The majority of professed Christians around the world who say that they want Jesus to return imminently are all a bunch of liars. They ignore the suffering in this world and all that money in the bank accumulating interest. Not a penny of it is used to help the poor and the needy. If the cap fits, wear it. There is a lot of unforgiveness in the hearts of people in the church. People who have not talked to each other for years. That includes family members or friends. And the church is the most racially divided institution on the entire planet. And you say we are living in the last days? Has not the Bible given us a clear divine mandate on cultural or racial divisions? In Acts chapter 10 and verse 35, it is very clear that in every nation he that feareth him and worketh righteousness is accepted with him. Does not the Bible say in 1 John that if a man says that he loves God but hates his brother, he is a what? A liar. For how can he not love his brother who he can see, but love God whom he can't see? For if you follow that divine command, if you profess to love God, then you have to love your brother also. Now, when the narrator has been observing the self-critique, especially of the black churches in America, it is more like self-hatred. And they don't ask this fundamental question. Why do we have black churches and white churches in the first place? Because it goes all the way right back to slavery. Well, in two books, The History of the Negro Church by Carter G. Woodson, talking about the American experience, and African Caribbean Church Culture by Barrington O'Borrow, talking about the British experience, they both confirm that black churches were formed because the whites, to this very day, have never wanted to integrate with the blacks. Nothing has changed in the 21st century in the digital age, even when blacks have tried to reach out. And the late Pastor Frederick Casey Price is the only black pastor who the narrator is aware of who has dealt with institutional racism and its effects. His sermons are powerful and deep. Very few preachers touch on it, and as they have not made a stand, in the 21st century the churches have seen a huge exodus of their members because the church is too afraid to touch on issues that makes people uncomfortable. If you ignore and sidestep issues, then you fail the members. And when the narrator sees men falsely claiming that it was when President Obama was elected, that's when the blacks made a softer stance towards homosexuality, that is a complete lie. It is well known in church circles that a good number of male praise and worship leaders are practicing homosexuals. And the down low movement, where married men would have their male lovers on the side, was way before Barack Obama was elected. And the gospel music industry has always compromised with the world, where top artists have always collaborated with secular producers and musicians. This is not Obama's fault. The apostasy was around before him. As the narrator brings this study to a close, he would like the viewers to know that he has received quite a few number of complaints from people falsely accusing him of being racist and stoking racial division among professed Christians in the church. This is quite strange to the narrator's ears, and he will explain. When the narrator was a child, his father reminded him the day when he was over the moon when he saw his first black pastor, because the church he belongs to discouraged blacks from becoming preachers. This is the same church that collaborated with the Nazis in Germany during the Second World War, supported the apartheid government in South Africa, endorsed the Jim Crow laws, and was sympathetic to the Ku Klux Klan in North America, and on many occasions collaborated with the US government that included the FBI, where they also received federal aid from the government. And this is the same church who said they want to finish the work of God. How are you going to finish the work and tell the world about the second coming of Christ with a church where the races don't even mix? That is not making any sense at all whatsoever. But the narrator was raised in a predominantly white neighborhood, went to a predominantly white school with white teachers and white friends, and we were like one family. When we used to have the school discos, as it was a predominantly white school, we used to dance music like Wham's Wake Me Up Before You Go-Go, Bananarama, I'm Your Venus, The Arithmetics, Sweet Dreams Are Made of These, Paul Simon, If You Be My Bodyguard, I'll Be Your Long Lost Pal, Pet Shop Boys, My Heart Is Missing a Beat, Spandau's Ballet, True, The Bangles, Walk Like an Egyptian, even Culture Club's Come Chameleon, and Madonna's Baal Worship Anthems. And it was a white family who looked after the narrator after school when his parents were at work. And when the narrator saw some old school friends he hadn't seen since primary school, just before the lockdown, we were reminiscing because we shared a history and have a common experience, a bond you don't share with the white Christians in the church who have always distanced themselves from us, but very quick to condemn us when it is convenient for them. But the narrator will like to leave people with some hope, as he has challenged people a lot in this study. In the middle of the 19th century, the Scottish historian Dr. James Aitken Wiley said, quote, "The church is not the work of man, it is a special creation of God, seeing it is wholly supernatural in its origin. We can look nowhere for information respecting its nature, its constitution, and its ends but to the Bible. The New Testament declares that the church is a spiritual society being composed of spiritual, that is, of regenerated men, associated under a spiritual head, that is, the Lord Jesus Christ, held together by spiritual bonds, which are faith and love, governed by spiritual laws which are contained in the Bible, enjoying spiritual immunities and privileges, and entertaining spiritual hopes. This is the church invisible, so called because its members as such cannot be discovered by the world. It is spread all over the world and embraces all in every place and of every name who believe in the Lord Jesus and are united by him as their head, and to one another as members of the same body by the bond of spirit and faith. So despite the corruptions in the church, God has not given up on his people." Now this study has covered many topics, and the late Charlie Kirk was only a small piece of a much bigger program that most are not ready for. But guess what? God has an even bigger program, an eternal one. And if you want to be a part of it, well, instead of spending your time looking for the faults and failures in others, look at the man in the mirror first. For there are some more interesting things still to take place on this earth.